Welcome everybody to another edition of Career Fox TV. I'm Nancy Fox, the Career Fox, and on this channel, we talk about all things that help you create prosperous careers doing what you love. Now, today we have a very special edition because I have a fantastic guest to interview and have a conversation with, and his name is James Townsend. Now, he's really fascinating on a number of fronts. So we're going to have a great conversation because he just made a career change and he beat out 500 other candidates in getting this fantastic new position. But we're going to dive into that in more detail in a moment. First, let me just tell you just a little bit about James. First of all, James and I, we met through networking. We met on Lunch Club and we got into a great conversation. And so now here we are. So just to show you that how important your networking really is. And James is, he is the sales manager for Videos, the executive sales manager for Videos, which is a video animation company. And he's going to tell you all about exactly what they do. And he's going to tell you exactly how he became to have that role. But in the past, James has a very extensive career background in sales and sales management, especially in the signage arena. And he'll talk a little bit about that as well and how he made all of this transition. So I just want to say welcome to James. Hey, James, how are you?
I'm very well, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's so great having you. And I love having people that are friends now across the pond because when we start traveling again, I'm coming over. So,
Not before I get to LA.
Well, we'll have transatlantic meetings, right? So,
Right.
James, first of all, I'm so happy that you decided that you would share your story and your journey with the people who are my subscribers and people who I'm sure are now going to become subscribers because they're going to want to hear your story. So the first thing I want to ask you is, I certainly want to hear how you got to do what you're doing, but the first thing I want to ask you is, what was it that had you changing careers and jobs at this point in your life? Like, what was the precipitating factor?
I suppose the main factor for me is that I've been in a role for a considerable amount of time, in today's world, for 4 years nearly. And I'd made a conscious decision that I wanted to move into another sector or another industry, whether that be one of interest or one that I'd had success in previously. So I'd made a conscious decision to do that. The timing of it, and I'll probably tell you more about that as we go through, was probably not the greatest in terms of the situation I then found myself in. But no, it was a conscious decision to do something else and to change what I was doing.
What made you decide? What were the factors, and what were you doing before what you're doing now? Like, what was your background, and give a little more
Yeah, so
flesh of that out.
yeah, so my background is over 20 years in sales. In insurance and technology is where I started my career and spent 10 to 15 years. And then I moved from that sector into signage, graphics, and print, to which I was in that industry for nearly 10 years. So yeah, the conscious decision for me, really, I'd had a lot of success previously in the tech sector, and it was an area that I had a lot of interest. So whilst it wasn't the only avenue for new employment I was looking for, it was certainly high on my list. And fortunately, I found my way to Videos.
Were you just not happy, or was it money, or was it people? What was it that made you want to make the move?
No, none of those. Probably none of those. I worked for a great employer, in a great organisation. I suppose it was, I was in a management role. We were trying to do things, lots of things, and sometimes it comes to a point where you try and do things that just won't work. So as opposed to sitting there and just banging your head against a brick wall, I was in a fortunate position. I had a very open relationship with the business that I worked with and the directors and the board, and we had open and frank conversations. So You know, it was just a conscious decision for me that I'd probably gone as far as I could go, and wanted to get back into a sector that I'd had some success, and also one that, you know, with technologies is there's always opportunity in technology,
Right.
you know, year on year. So that was the reason.
So it's almost like you felt like you had more to do, more, you needed more purpose, more opportunity. You just felt like you were maybe stuck, or maybe at a level stall where you couldn't really go further.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I've got what I term entrepreneurial spirit, and I've seen it in lots of people I've worked for, and that doesn't go away with me. Have I actually got up and started a business? No. Is that a step too far for me? Possibly, or who knows? But the reality is that entrepreneurial spirit is a drive to be constantly improving, and you know, it's not always a good thing. But that is what probably drove me to move out of that sector. I just felt I could really go or push the area of my expertise as much as I could in that sector, and really needed to look for an industry that really defines itself by its sales
Got it.
conduct, which is tech, you know. Yeah.
So you really wanted to have more opportunity. And did you leave your old job before you got a new one, or were you looking before you left?
No, I left before I got a new one.
Wow, very
And
scary.
well, yeah, and I'll tell you exactly the circumstances. So I made the I made the decision at the beginning of, I have to remember what years. I struggle to remember what month we're in, let alone years. But at the
I
beginning
know
of
what you mean.
at the beginning of last year, I'd made the conscious decision that I was going to leave, and spoke to my existing employer, and we had a phased approach to that, because I was, you know, in a position where I was going to just take a few weeks to really invest my time and effort in finding that right role. So it was a little bit scary, but it come with some thought and some planning, and some some elements of planning around that. So let me take you back to middle of March last year, was when I left the business, and a week later, Boris Johnson announced a full lockdown in the UK.
Crazy.
And then obviously, the whole world changed. So from my point of view, at that stage, I'd gone from leaving a business on a high, with what I thought was a strong resume, in a buoyant market, to be faced 7 days later with a challenge.
Wow.
So perhaps tell you a bit more about that as we go.
That's crazy. Now, so when you did that, did you revamp your resume? Did you work on it yourself, or did you work with somebody else to do that?
Yeah. So initially, I did all of those. Initially, I did probably what everybody does when
You froze.
circumstance, and sent my resume to anybody who would receive it, and probably applied for every job that I could find available, that I could link my skill set to. That's the blind panic, as I like to call it, that you perhaps do in the first
Right.
2 or 3 weeks of this situation, and then you have time to actually, well, you've got the time, so you have to reevaluate. The key things for me were, I had a good resume, so I needed to make sure that was telling the right story in the right way. And I went out to some of these resume services, free ones, and in fairness, got quite a mixed reply. Some people who thought it was good, some people who absolutely, threw it in the bin and said start again. But of course, they're looking for potentially some sale behind that. So I understand the process there. I think what helped was, having the experience of writing my own resume over a few years. But I actually used mentors and people I knew well just to road test it with, really. You know, I've been fortunate to make some great connections in business and just run it by them and say, look, you know, is this, and I did that with 3 or 4 people, and that really helped.
Did you get some
So
consistency and feedback on the resume? Was there some one factor that you tweaked that might want to share? Like, I changed this
yeah,
on my resume because I didn't realize that, or something.
yeah. I think the biggest thing is to tell people what you can do as opposed to what you've already done.
Oh, okay, flashing highlight sign, everybody. Tell them what you can do for them versus what you have done, right? Okay,
Yeah,
great tip. Okay, awesome.
yeah, and you know, don't not highlight the things that you've done, the really good things, but when you're doing it, is explain it or build a story behind it that is relevant to who you're being interviewed by. So that was probably the biggest thing. And in lots of cases, probably less is more. You know, invest in really thinking about what you're writing. You know, a great online tool that I use is Grammarly, and it's really brilliant. It's fantastic for, you know, somebody like me who has a good grasp of English language and writing, but always wants to be better. So use a free tool or something like that as well.
Yeah, great. So how long did it take you to get your first interviews?
Um, Probably once I'd put my resume out there, and that was LinkedIn and through recruitment agents, probably a couple of weeks.
Okay, so it's pretty quick.
Yeah, it was, but it was only they were in short supply, so already I'd seen the impact that of what was having um, in the economy, and also, you know, it's worth highlighting at this point. Whilst I'd made the conscious decision to change industry, I now wasn't in a position to just sit on that hope of getting that. I also had to explore jobs that I could jump straight back into potentially.
To get a
So
paycheck. Yeah, to get a paycheck.
absolutely, that you know, that challenge had just presented itself, or all of a sudden presented itself. So yeah, a couple of weeks, but they were only the odd one or two, and they were all very let's have a conversation. They weren't formal interviews. They were, okay, that, you know, we might have the role for the right person, for the right fit. And in my experience, they never really come to much, you know.
So they were more like looky-loo conversations instead of serious, we need
Yeah,
somebody, are you the right
yeah,
one? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and so along the way, so you used LinkedIn. How did you use LinkedIn?
Okay, well, I've I'd used LinkedIn as a tool, and have done for a number of years. Like many people in sales, initially probably more as a research tool. Um, and this was the first time when I'd really understood LinkedIn's potential as a recruitment
It's
tool as
pretty
well.
powerful, right? Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, um, what did I do? I started following, or not necessarily following, but looking out for influencers in the recruitment sector. What sort of things were they saying? There was one guy who I now follow, who actually, just from his post, gave me my roadmap for online interviews, just from his post.
Hmm.
I could have sat there for hours trying to think, how do I plan this, and how do I, and you know, just and he on a whiteboard there in front of him, behind his screen, in direct eye level, 5 or 6 bullet points, and there was the answer. So I used experience of research from a job and what I do in terms of sales and finding the right people to connect to, in doing the right things in the recruitment search. I took the mindset that this was now my job. My job was to find a job.
Right.
And every day I had to assign hours, like you would do in any normal job, to doing that. And so it was research, and I used LinkedIn for that. And then obviously now the ability to upload your resume, a lot more businesses are using it. And that's how videos found me, and I found videos, and
Did
that's how I got
they
the
found
job.
you through, did they find you through a resume bank, like a job search? Was it a search? They were looking and then they found your resume through their bank, or was it more direct?
No, I applied. I applied for the role, but interestingly, videos are only advertising their roles on social,
Yeah.
and not you, because again, we're reaching out to people to work for our business that are tech minded. So, the recruitment agent, the recruitment consultant is not a natural path for our business anyway, to
Right.
recruit people. So again, for me, it was having that understanding of that social site, LinkedIn, what its power is, and then using it as I found lots of great jobs on LinkedIn actually, and applied for a number of really good, positions I was interested in, had some success. But no, this was a complete LinkedIn recruitment for me, as it actually says on my profile. I think I've tagged it that I got this job through LinkedIn.
Amazing. That's fantastic. I really believe like networking, they say that 80% of the jobs available are not posted online. And they also say that, 70% of people who find their jobs do it through networking, and LinkedIn is networking. So, LinkedIn it's a networking site that's social, but it's still networking. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the interviewing process. You got your first interview. Was it with one person, several people? What was the experience for you?
For the first interview I got in the job hunt, or the first interview for this particular role that I've secured?
Either. Share your.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So we'll talk about the role of videos. So it was with my boss, Fiona Hunt, and one of the founders of our business, David Chamberlain. It all happened fairly quickly. Actually, it was. I was contacted by Fiona on a particularly bad day. I remember I'd had one rejection that morning of a role that I was quite interested in.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. So
yeah,
you weren't in a good space.
it was a Friday. I'd had a pretty gloomy Friday up to that point. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if I remember. And I got this call from Fiona, who's Australian, and said, we've had your CV. We're really interested in talking to you. Can we set up an interview? So that was an initial 5-10 minute. I suppose it turned into a telephone interview to some degree, but it wasn't. It was a nice chat and absolutely interested. So my first interview with Fiona and David Chamberlain, video. So it was a video interview, and I'd done 2 or 3 of these. And even though I've done video sales calls before, they are now becoming the norm.
Yeah.
Didn't feel a comfortable experience. So I was probably more nervous than I would have been if I'd have been walking into a room with them. And yeah, it was a what I liked about it for me is that instantly with Fiona and David, they put me at ease, and it became very much an exploratory conversation about really what my skill sets could bring to this potential role, or this role that this new role they were looking to create, which was great for me because my research of them and this is how I apply my research, is that, you know, I try to align myself to what I've done and what I could do to what I believed or understood, or, you know, had been able to understand from my research about what they were looking for. So, and I do that, you know, lots of job posts will put in specific, you know, 10 to 15 bullet points, what we want from you. And one thing I do is I try and turn everyone into a question and give it an answer. You know, how can I answer that? How can I answer that that particular question?
That's another great nugget. Highlight. So what you do is you take a job description that people are searching for, and each item you turn it into a question, how to positively give them what they want, into a question like, how can I give them what they want through this particular desire? Very, very good point. I've never heard anybody do it that way. That's excellent. Okay, continue on.
Cool. So, and that helps them, because when I had the interview, doing that process and then combining it, as I mentioned earlier, with that little nugget I got off LinkedIn from a recruit and influencer about how to have your notes there and in front of you, you know, in bullet point form. I felt that I was able to prepare well, and David or Fiona may or may not agree to this, but I came off the interview feeling that I'd over prepared, because I'd got a lot of things that we hadn't talked about that we could talk about at the second interview, which, you know, I've been in enough interviews to sort of get an idea of how one might be going. So yeah, there was a lot of synergy, and it you know, it was a really positive experience.
So now, as you went into, how many interviews did it take for you to actually close this engagement with them?
2.
Two. So it's very short, really. They really
Yeah.
obviously zeroed in. How do you know that you beat out so many other candidates? I think you said 500.
Yeah, so they shared this information with me after I'd been employed. There was actually quite a nice press release that went out, which was, I'm quite a modest guy really, so I sort of don't like that sort of stuff. But anyway, yeah, it was, they'd had over 500 applications for the role, and you know, I've never delved on this too much, but you know, you can imagine that's going to be from a broad spectrum of candidates. And the fact was, I hadn't worked in tech for 10 years.
That's
So
really something, because usually the mindset of a company, especially in the tech space, is that they want the most current people. Like they've got all these very current people. So what they tell you that it was about you, that they selected you after not being in tech for 10 years? Did they tell you?
yeah, so yeah, absolutely. It's in my job title really. So it's that enterprise business to business element was the key thing that they were looking for. So what my career demonstrates is that I've been able to sell business to business solutions across a number of industries. There was specifics to those diverse industries that really appealed. One being the technology to videos, and the other side in the signs and print is the design and the branding elements to the work that I was doing with customers, large nationals, globals. So it was that specific, you know, capability that they were looking for. But it's interesting because, you know, I overlooked in my job search many jobs. As soon as I saw a technical sales or a technical element to a role, there's no point. If I can't specifically sell that device in that sector,
Yeah.
then it was overlooked. And you know, fortunately for me, the way that the videos had presented the role, it was to catch people in tech, but also people outside of that industry, but who could bring that business to business sales expertise.
They needed somebody who could develop relationships on the business to business side. So you had that under your belt, and that's who you really. So that really leads me to on the mindset and personality. Like when you interviewed with any of the not just videos but other companies, what did you look for? What kinds of questions did you ask them when in the interview? I think a lot of people go into interviews and job searches feeling so behind the eight ball and having so little leverage, and there you are leaving your job like completely shocked that this complete cataclysm happened right after you did this. I'm going to ask you about your mindset about this in a minute, but first I want to know, like, what questions did you ask employers? Because I think most people have, they want to be good, they want to be great at answering questions, but I don't think that they realize the power of really good questions for their potential employer. And plus, I don't think they interview the employer enough to figure out if it's going to be a good cultural fit, a good experience for them. So they often set themselves up for failure by taking the job because they need the job, but not being in a company where there's a good fit. So what kinds of questions did you ask them?
I think one of the questions that I would always look to ask any employer is all around expectation, really. So it's questions about expectation, and I think you've got to have the mindset here that you're prepared to demonstrate this. So, what do you want to see from me in the first 3 months? What is it that what are you hoping to achieve in the first 3 months? Especially if it's a newly created role where the role or the job role may be somewhat loose at this stage. What key performance indicators can we put in? And I think if you're prepared to put yourself out there with that sort of questioning, it demonstrates to any employer that you're willing to back yourself. So it was question. I had one interview that I didn't really want to go to. I didn't want the job. But I went to it and I drove over 2 hours. It was during the time when there was a little bit of movement in the UK last summer. And I drove over 2 hours for it because,
Wow.
I was in that position and that particular day I was in that mindset of I've got to do this. And I went there and my questioning was really quite blunt and direct because unless I was going to get exactly what I wanted, then it was, and that was not a great starting point for the interview. It lasted about 25 minutes and we said goodbye and, on nice terms. But I think if you find a role that you really want and desire and think that you can do, then your questioning needs to demonstrate that you're really serious and say, right, okay, well, I don't want to be here 6-9 months down the line and muddling along and we don't know where we're at. Let's put some markers in the ground and I'll demonstrate what I can do. A good way, I think, is always offering to do a 30-day, a 60-day or a 90-day plan for a particular employer. I see more.
Will you give them that plan for free? Or will you actually want your job in it?
No. Again, you would leverage that as moving to another conversation or a second meeting. You could well leverage it at that point. But again, it depends how much you want the job and your situation. I think if there's a role that you really want and you've got a chance, you've got to that interview, you've prepared well, you've presented yourself well, then you want to take control and almost say, well, if I do this, what does...
Yeah, so in other words, it's a very clear, in other words, if they say, hey, do a plan for us and there's no, well, if you do this and it all works out, we're going to, you really sort of suss out whether there's serious commitment on both sides. It's really more of and interactivity kind of experience with them. So let me go back. I want to ask you a question about the emotional side of this process, because how much did emotion play into your way of operating, acting, because you mentioned that you had, on the very day that you had your first conversation with your current company, that you had missed out on an opportunity that you thought you really wanted. Talk about the emotional side of it, the mindset side of it. It sounds to me like you have a lot of confidence in yourself. You had a lot of belief in yourself because you actually chose to leave your previous job. You weren't let go. That's a big factor when you're, if you're let go from a company, there's a lot of, psychological, you know, residue left on that side. So talk a little bit about how you managed your emotions. What did you do with your fear? How did you deal with that?
Um, yeah, I think one way, my wife likes to tell me this is a psychopathic tendency, but I think
They
one
always
thing
tell
you've
the
got
truth.
one thing you've got to do is or learn the ability to compartmentalize certain things. So I'd made a conscious decision to leave. That decision had already been made before circumstances changed my position. So to some degree there, I was comfortable with that, whilst there was some, gritting of teeth and is it all going to pan out in the end? So there's that. Um, it's difficult, as I mentioned earlier. You sort of, for the first 2 weeks, there was some blind panic after thinking I was in control to being completely out of control. Um, so I think everybody naturally will have a period where that will happen, and that's really where friends, family, the closest to you, are probably the most important at that time. But then, once that is through, then very exceptional circumstances last year. We were dealing with other emotions, and you could almost argue that distraction at that time made it a little bit easier, because I felt I could relate that lots and lots and lots and lots of people are in exactly the same boat as me. And
So you
lots of
didn't feel,
people.
like, oh, there's something wrong with me.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And yeah, there were probably days where I'd sent my resume for 10 jobs and heard nothing, and that I might think that for 24 hours. But again, if you can compartmentalize that to that 24 hours and then, move on to that next day, then it helps with the emotional side of job hunting. And I'm not saying it's easy, but you've literally, I approach it like I do with sales. No 2 days are the same. One could be bad, one could be good. You've got to treat them similar, really.
Is there a mindset game that you work on with yourself, even in your sales? Do you use some tricks, mental mindset tricks, to support yourself in, when in those times where, this is it was job search for you, but it's also now you're in a new role. And the first 100 days of a new role it's like, it's the
It's
honeymoon
hard work.
period. Yeah, it's the
Yeah, yeah.
honeymoon, but the honeymoon's ending. So talk a little bit about that. I really want to hear about your inner game as well as your outer game, because obviously your outer game is really strong.
Yeah, so the inner game is it's hard for me, actually, but I suppose what I found, I've got four children, and we've got a big family, and probably been hearing it through the interview because they're on half term. But that is a great distraction for me. But I think the one thing that helped me through the difficult times of job searching was finding other ways to find achievement, or see or gain achievement. I'm ultra competitive, have to be winning at something. And I suppose you can relate it to searching for a job. You can relate it into the hard times in a new job, that finds something that you can win at. So what did I do? Some of the things I did was decorated the house, for instance. It was an achievement that I could do aside from doing the job hunting at that time. I've rediscovered a love for cooking. So again, achievement to improve what I do every time. And these are things that I can dip in and out of when needed to get that achievement that I need, so that the disappointments can be, compartmentalized and left where they are, really. So
That's a really good idea of compartmentalizing. So I have a question for you. Are you hiring, do you personally have a part of your role that requires you to hire other people now?
No, not at the moment.
I'm just wondering, but in the past, have you been someone who hired teams of people?
Yeah. So my previous role, I recruited, the sales team. Put the sales team together.
So what were you, I just want to ask you, now that right now you're not hiring people, and now you've been on both sides of the fence. You've just gotten through a successful job search. And you've also been on the side where you've been the interviewer and the hirer. What do you think are the biggest mistakes that people who interview for jobs make? Like, what do you find, what would you advise people who are looking for a job right now? Like, what's the biggest tip you would give them? Where do you think they fall down the most?
I think, well, if I relate it to sales, I would say it is focusing far too much on technical capabilities sometimes, and actually losing sight of the person and what they can bring. A good example of this was actually my previous employer. Not saying that videos isn't there a good example as well, but my previous employer, it's very much about the type of person and the fit for the team a lot of the time than were they the most skilled at that particular role.
Why? Why was that? Why is that? Why do you think that?
Because I think for employers that gives there's more likelihood they're going to get a better return on investment for that particular employee. If there's a cultural fit, then there's more likely that they're going to stay with that business through the good and the bad times for them in their employment, or the good and the challenging times in their employment. And also, I've worked for a number of businesses over my years, but the ones that have wanted to bring in people with a thirst for learning and demonstrating a thirst to learn and wanting to learn have been the really successful businesses I've seen, that have gone from 10 employees to 200, have gone from 1 million to 20 million. It's all about driving the business from the inside, from the culture. I'm gonna reference a business here just because they're an absolute massive Birmingham, West Midlands, UK success, which is Gymshark. The gymwear brand. Anybody take a look at them for 30 seconds and see how culture drives a business. And they're the businesses for me that are winning, but they're going after skilled people, but they're looking at more than just skills. They're looking at character, personality, team fit, all of those things. Is this person going to put a silly hat on a Friday on a Zoom call, and all of those sort of things. And I think everybody now you've got to, whether you like it or loathe those type of interactions, you've got to go, I'll give it a go. We'll give it a go.
It's really important. Like, I think the whole thing, I think people, I think we talk about the word character and personality and fit, and I don't know that everybody really gets what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. And I think people they've never learned how to ask about it and they haven't learned how to demonstrate it. So you can be very prepared for an interview, for the answering of questions, you know. I That's why I'm so intrigued about the kinds of questions that you ask your employer. Like, did you ask questions of videos that would give you information about who they are as people? Like, what kinds of things because after all, you want a good job, but you also want to know that it's going to turn out well. Because what happens if you walk in the door and 90 days later you go, these are not, I've had jobs in my career where I got the job and I walked into that company. They were excellent at demonstrating all the right words and all the right attitudes and they had the greatest buzzwords. They had studied them. They knew what to say. I walked in the door. It wasn't like that at all. And I went, who are these people? It was really like a shock. So I wonder, like, did you ask questions of videos that gave you a good indication that this was a good fit for you, not just that you could do the job?
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, fortunately for me, in that initial interview, the role was well explained. It was, you know, the nature of the role, the fact that we were looking to focus now on a particular line of business, and that you know, it was a new challenge for the business, I suppose, is the right word to use. So, you know, what that led to though was my questioning. Okay, where, how, who, why? Those sort of questions that, and simply that fortunately for me, David Chamberlain, my boss, it was more than willing to share, because he
Yeah.
wanted that candidate to have a real understanding of the challenge, the exciting challenge of what was needed. So yeah, okay, great. You want to do this? Where? Which type of customer do you think?
Mhm.
Why do you think they would? And you know, that's the sort of open questioning that will get you to be able to shut up for 5 minutes probably and listen to what they have to say, and then get all of that information that can be really useful to you for your own due diligence on the role, but more importantly, so you can gain that insight to the next step when you've got to put that presentation together and they want you to wow them with, you know, what you've learned, and you
Yeah.
can define what you're going to do for them in that role.
So, what have you learned through this process? What new awareness, either about yourself, about your life, about life in general, what have you learned from this process? What's something that you'd like us to know about this part of your journey? Um,
Yeah. So it's been tough. It's something that was unexpected, in the way that I sort of, I left the driveway and then all the roads started going higgledy-piggledy. I hadn't even got to
yes,
drive until it all
you
started.
got tossed right into the chaos, yeah. Talk about
Yeah,
always expect the unexpected. You really lived it.
yeah. And I suppose what 12 months, 18 months of that is, you know, it I started to take things a lot less seriously, which was good for me. You know, previous hang-ups on certain things I was able uh, to lose. Um, that came from actually having a little bit of time also to, when I wasn't working, to, you know, to have some space. But it's also good things that I've now taken in to my new role, where, you know, perhaps stress levels would have been a lot higher than normal. So, but you know, that is I think a lot of people will feel like that as well, you know, with what's happened. So so yeah, that's that's sorry, I'm being distracted, Nancy. Sorry, it's all right.
It's a, are you okay?
Yeah, it's
This
okay.
is, this is what happens in life today. So it's really okay.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, yeah, it's okay now. I'm back with you. Can we move on to the next question? Sorry, is that
Yeah,
okay?
sure. So
Thanks.
I just really want to ask you, I guess, I'll say a little bit more about now that you're in this role, you're developing your client base and you're working on developing new business. I guess the last question I want to ask you, because we met through networking, how are you using your networking? What kinds of networking are you doing now to actually leverage to create the results for your company that you have, in your goal roadmap, and maybe a networking tip or two?
Yeah, certainly. So in terms of networking now, um, I'm probably taking a very different approach to what I have done in the past. I've always found it challenging as a salesperson uh, to define the line between um, pushy and not pushy, in the sales
Yeah,
arena is probably the
yeah,
best
yeah,
way to
yeah,
put
yeah.
that. And I suppose in previous networking face to face, I've always found that quite easy to overcome, but challenging when it's digital. So I've really evaluated, my approach really a lot of the time. Uh, Lots of salespeople say this, but we want to be problem solvers really. So reach out to people to try and fix problems. And the only way that you're going to identify if they've got any of those problems is if you research them and understand their business, or understand them, or understand the market. So I apply a lot of what I do to how I research, and then the ability to create a you know create a story. And for networking, so we met through Lunch Club. Number of sort of other network channels that I use. LinkedIn, again, a fantastic networking tool. The only thing I would say about LinkedIn, a little tip for anybody who's new to it, or maybe not new to it but has now got full of connections they don't want, is, again, take that same approach you would do at a networking event. If there's 30 people in the room, it's unlikely that you're going to want to speak to all 30. Really try and find a meaningful way to connect with the 5 or 6 that you do want to.
Targeted, make it targeted. Yeah, so you have to know who you want to meet.
Yeah, make it targeted. And I think one thing I haven't mentioned is, one of the things that's kept me going through my career is that thirst to learn. Even at my age now, 44, I want to learn more. I've probably got more of an appetite to learn now than I had at 16 or 17 when I should have had it. But I think if you have that appetite to learn, then you'll continue to find ways of making the right connections, with the right people, and doing it the right way. And I'd certainly, from meeting you, Nancy, and other meetings I've had, I think Lunch Club is certainly something every one of your viewers should have a look at if they're in business. It's a nice way to connect when we can't meet, in a room at the moment.
Yeah, I'm really happy that we met, because while sometimes in your particular endeavor you might have one particular purpose, but you might have other things that could lead to, so you have to start to learn how to connect the dots. One of the things I just want to riff off of what you said about LinkedIn and the targeting, no matter what today, I think there are ways, even if you don't create your own content to deliver on LinkedIn, you can still leverage content on LinkedIn as a networking tool by commenting. Like, let's say in a business to business environment, you're looking to meet probably the marketing directors or the VPs of marketing in most companies, right? I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell people what you're looking for right now, so they'll know, and you can network with them. But let's just say that you ideally want to meet a lot of marketing directors and decision makers, right? very often those companies are posting content, and you can comment and start to meet the right decision makers in those companies. The commenting and the sharing is something they want. So now you've got something to give them instead of something that you're asking for. And I think it becomes a very interesting push-pull kind of thing. I shouldn't say push-pull, but positive, negative kind of thing, because it takes time to create content, but it doesn't take very much time to share it and to comment on it and then have that be a lead in to meet people. So on that point, James, what I want to ask you is, so now tell us a little bit about videos and who you want to be meeting so that people out there will be able to either connect with you. How do they find you? How do they connect with you? Who do you want to be meeting? Tell a little bit about that right now so that we can have this time be not only great for what I want to share with people, but now have it go back to you.
Yeah, great, fantastic. So yeah, happy to tell you about videos. So let me tell you how it's spelt first of all, VIDDYOZE. And videos is a SaaS animation platform that was created 5 years ago to empower anybody of any level of skill, technical ability to be able to produce professional quality videos, Facebook style ads, TikTok ads, you know, all of those wonderful things that we're now seeing in our generation. So it was started 5 years ago, and it's grown in that time to over 150,000 users globally.
Yeah.
And in essence, what it can do for businesses, and this is specifically what I'm looking to do. Anybody who has a business, whether that be a small business, a medium-sized business, or a large corporate organization, anybody that is looking to have more meaningful connections with their customers, and also better use their data to have those meaningful connections, then our software is an enabler of that. Mm-hmm. So straight off the shelf, if you were to have a license now, Nancy, you'd be able to go in there. You'd have a range of over 1,000 templates that you could put your business logo, your business strapline, your products, your services, and in 3 clicks and about 3 minutes, you could have a Facebook style ad that you can push out onto social.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it was it's really there, you know, again, as we see the next generation coming through, the millennials, the consumption of video that's going on. I mean, they predict that by the end of next year, 87% of all web traffic will be video. You know, it's an important medium. I mean, you go back to just go back to content a sec about sharing content. I totally agree with what you said there, by the way, about you can reuse content as long as you add value to that or opinion and generate that way. But I think what I see as the main problem in probably most businesses is the way that they're using all of the content available to them, or all of the mediums so whether that be video, long format text, email marketing, all of those different formats. And the reality is you need to have a combination. It's about having that. But what we are, we're an enabler for businesses that may have looked at video previously, that have found it either too expensive, too challenging. You know, what a customer's brief is and what somebody can deliver can always, as we all know, can be difficult things to define. It's a tool that you can literally put into the hands of any business and say, right, you can start having an impact on your customers, winning more customers and having more meaningful conversations.
It's awesome. So like, I'm going to post what I'm going to do below this video is in the comment box. I'm going to post all of your contact information. So everybody can reach out to you. I'll post your email address. I'll post your website. And people can get a hold of you so that they know exactly and they can learn more. And, you know, and I think if you, I've taken a look at this myself, and I do now that I'm doing a lot of videos, and now that you're mentioning, Facebook ads, I mean, there are some really great connections right away. What happens for me is when I talk, this is a beautiful thing about networking. I'd love to open some doors for our conversation to other people so they know about you. I really want to thank you so much. Is there any last tip you want to give any people who are watching this career channel about what you would advise them as their, because like you had a pretty direct approach, but is there one last tip you want to give people to leave them with, something that's going to help them in their process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many different people going through so many different challenges in terms of career, whilst having to balance all the other bad things that or seem to be happening. So I think that there's really got to be an importance in your health and well-being, however that is found. Family, friends, exercise, whatever that may be. You've got to be so kind to yourself. Draw strength on the fact that you are not the only person going through this, and also draw strength that those circumstances could change very, very quickly. So it would be that really, and don't be afraid to challenge yourself, even if it feels like the most dreadful thing. It can't be any worse. You can't. It's very rare that you have a job in your hands and then lose it at the final hurdle because you've tried something or you've put yourself out there. In fact, I would argue, when I've ever seen that in it, that gains credibility for me if somebody's trying to do something and put themselves out there. So
your tip is really like, go for it and stretch, and don't make it, really take care of yourself, especially in these really challenging times.
Absolutely.
I have loved listening to you. It's really fascinating. I love meeting new people and learning what their journey is like, because I've been on both sides of this fence, this career fence, both on the job search side and on the entrepreneurial side. And there are certainly challenges on both ends, but no matter what, there's the meeting new people, meeting really good new people, wherever, however it happens, is just, I think it's the most miraculous thing, really, when you really start to listen to people's stories. It certainly takes all of what's not going right in our world and like cancels it out, makes you feel so much better about everything. So I really want to thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time, your willingness to share. Congratulations on the position. I hope it goes nothing but awesome for you. And I'll post all of your contact information, and I will definitely be sharing about this on LinkedIn so everybody knows about it. And I'll definitely let people know how they can find you as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you ever so much, Nancy.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's my really want to say thank you. Thank you, James, and have a great day. And thank you for sharing your family, and thank your family for giving you to us for a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, James. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.